Well, good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, great. And happy Mother's Day. I want to echo what my husband Nate shared. Even though today is a great celebratory day, I know for many of us it can be a different feeling today. So we want to acknowledge that. Once again, I remember the first Mother's Day after I had a miscarriage, and it was hard. And I just wanted that day to be over. And I just remember feeling like I wanted to hide that day, but I also wanted to celebrate the other moms. So we recognize the tension of that, but we also want to celebrate your mom. And those of you who have moms, take the time to celebrate them today. What I'm going to talk to you about today has to do with all of us, not just moms. So I don't want, just because you're like, I'm not a mom, it's a Mother's Day sermon, there's a lady up here, do not tune out. It is for all of us. What I want to talk about today is being a peacemaker. And blessed are the peacemakers, is what Jesus talked about. And what a perfect day to talk about that on Mother's Day. Because if you're a mom, you have learned a lot of peacemaking skills. You are constantly probably having to manage conflict. If they're like my kids are 3 years apart, and they will battle over some toy that they've never played with, but now it's like the sacred toy that no one cared about, but 2 seconds ago her brother touched it, and now it's like the battle royale. And you're constantly trying to manage these little trivial conflicts. So we learn about peacemaking from our children. They teach us a lot. My parents recently they took all our old family videos, and I was born in 78, so it's like a reel. They took it and got all of those videos compiled onto a USB and sent it to me in the mail. And as I was looking at these videos, I'm watching me and my sisters interact, me and my parents interact. And when I was about 11 or 12, I have a sister who's 6 years younger than me. We both cheered on the Boys and Girls Club, and we were on the same team. And there's this one moment where we're like cheering, we doing our little thing, and then like we run off, and I am like way too cool to hang out with her. I'm hanging out with my friends on the team, and she's like way over here. Now at the time, as 11 or 12-year-old, you get it. We think we know stuff at 11 and 12, right? We think we're cool. We think we're like, my hair was like really bad. It was like a big old bang with some spiral curl, and I'm like, what was I doing? And I was very proud of this hairstyle, which I'm like, what was I thinking? But my sister over here is way over here, and it was like I was embarrassed by her. Didn't want her to embarrass me in front of my friends. And at the time, I understood that. But now as a parent, like now having children myself, I watched that, and I was like grieving, like, Shauna, like, why were you so rude to your sister? She's like right there. Like, you were supposed to be taking care of her. You were supposed to be watching over her. So I think as a parent now, I just see those things so differently with my own kids. And I love what these parents did. If you look at these pictures, for their kids, when they were fighting, they got them a Get Along shirt. And these kids really love it. Can't you tell? They're really happy about it. They're like really sad about it. Their head is held in shame. This girl's pretty mad. That's kind of like the face I remember a lot in these family videos. That was my face in a lot of pictures. But when I didn't get what I wanted or my way. Families are often our first experience in learning how to manage conflict, how to manage relationships. This is where we learn how to fight, how to grieve, how to get along, how to share, how to manage conflict, how to engage conflict or not engage conflict. This is how we learn how to care for another person. This is how we learn how to do life, really. And we take those skills we learn, and then we try to handle this adulthood thing, right? We take all those skills and we're like, okay, I'm going to do what I learned. It doesn't always work, because sometimes what we learned is not the way forward. And we can't take our childish ways and put them in adult bodies, and it doesn't always work, right? So we're always having to relearn, recalibrate how we manage our relationships with each other. If you grew up in a home where truth-telling was not allowed, maybe you grew up in a home where there was, maybe addiction, maybe there was abuse, maybe there were some high-stakes conversations that no one was willing to have. You probably either learned to be very quiet and not tell truth, not confront, or you learned to either tell the truth all the flipping time. You were like, I am not and we're not going to tell this crowd. We're going to tell the truth. Maybe you grew up in a home where raising your voice was the norm. So y'all just yelled, just having fun, yelling. And you try to use those skills in adult relationships, people shut down when you you notice, well, they're shutting down. They're not even listening to me. So you have to recalibrate and learn a new way, right? Same thing with if you learn to not address things. That doesn't work in life. You have to address things. So at the end of the day, we all have these skills we try to bring into learning to be peacemakers in our world, but they don't always work. So we have to learn from Jesus, honestly, and a lot of hard work on ourselves to become peacemakers in our world. So if we look at the verse, Matthew 5:9, this is in the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus, at this point, he had been followed by these huge crowds, and he takes them up on a mountain. And he says, begins to give them some instructions about living this blessed life. And we're going to focus today on Matthew 5:9. It says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." That mirror's bothering me. And then in the Message it says, "You're blessed when you show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family." I love how it says this verse in the Message, that when you show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight, that's when you discover who you really are. In the New Living Translation, it says, "God blesses those who work for peace." So this peacemaking work is not passive work. It is active. It is life-changing. It is hard work. It is teaching people how to cooperate. It is teaching people how to live together. And it requires intentionality. It's not going to happen by accident. You're not going to accidentally make peace, okay? It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to be intentional. If we go back to the beginning of Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount is what we know it as. If you can see there, he'll put a picture up of where they believe this sermon took place. So there's this hillside. Jesus has all these people following him, and he climbs the hill. I feel like Jesus might have been a little introverted sometimes, that I can relate to him. But I'm just adding that. That's Shauna. So we don't know that. But he climbed the hill, he sat on a rock, and he began to teach those who were willing to climb and come close. So when he's talking about this blessed life and the Sermon on the Mount, his audience is the people who are willing to come close. The crowd could probably hear bits and pieces, but his main audience were those who were willing to climb, come close to him. So we need to remember that in the packaging of the way he spoke. When he talked about living a blessed life, this was a revolutionary sermon for his time. See, in that time, usually people focus more on the outward things, like following these rules. Then you are good in the world, right? Then you are religious and you have done the right thing. Jesus was saying, no, we're done with that. You can see over and over again in his life, he always came against those religious leaders in his time. And he was more focused on doing the inner work. So when he talks about living a blessed life, he begins by saying, "Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are those who mourn." Now, those who are mourning, do they feel blessed? Probably not. But he says you are blessed when you mourn. "Blessed are those who are gentle. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, and blessed are the peacemakers." And it continues, as we will continue in this series. But if we stop there at blessed are the peacemakers, what does it mean to be blessed? When we think about what Jesus was talking about here, he was talking about to live in a way that that extends his provision, his favor on your life. Now, everybody in this room wants that, right? We all want that. We want it to come to us like manna. Just come and bring it, God. Just give us the blessing. But what he's saying, the way to live in that provision and blessing, the Southern came out there, blessing, like blessing, is to let him do a work in you so that he can then do a work through you. This mourning, peacemaking, that's an inner work that has to happen. It doesn't just happen to you. It happens in you. And that's different. That's harder work. That's a different level of work. But we all want this blessing, right? And when we look at what the original, like when you go back and look at the original meaning of what he meant by peacemaker here, I love this definition. It says it means to bravely declare God's terms, which makes someone whole. A peacemaker is someone who bravely declares God's terms, which makes someone whole. They are peace workers. They are not merely making peace with those who are odds with each other, but working at peace, which is the will of God for men. And what does this blessing look like? If you become a peacemaker, what will that mean for you? It means you will be called children of God. It means you will look like your Father. It means you will look like God to those around you. That's what he says. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who bravely declare God's terms, which make someone whole. That doesn't mean we declare God's terms so we can chop people up and tell them how bad they are. We say it in a way to make them whole. That requires work. That requires intention. Because I don't know about you, but my go-to when I'm upset or angry or hurt is not to make someone whole. It is to tear them down and fight hard, right? So I thought it was cool. I looked through some different commentaries on that have studied this passage. And so some of them talked about peacemaking, not merely those who have peace in their own souls through purity or peace-loving, but the active, heroic promoters of peace in a world full of alienation, party passion, and strife. Another commentary says, those who not only keep the peace, but seek to bring men into harmony with each other. So those are the peace workers, those out there seeking to bring men into harmony with each other. There's a book called The Book of Common Prayer, A Liturgy for Ordinary Radicals. This quote's in your notes, too, and it'll be up on the screen. This is powerful, and I think it brings us right back to what peacemaker means. Peace is not about the absence of conflict. It's also about the presence of justice. A counterfeit peace exists when people are pacified or distracted or so beat up and tired of fighting that all seems calm. But true peace does not exist until there is justice, restoration, and forgiveness. Peacemaking doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting injustice without mirroring injustice. The act of disarming evil without destroying the evildoer. The act of finding a third way, that is neither fight nor flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. It is about a revolution of love that is big enough to set both the oppressed and the oppressor free. Once again, it takes us back to that original meaning of peacemaker, to bravely declare God's terms, which make someone whole. So there is a way that is Jesus' way of setting the oppressed and the oppressor free. There is a way of managing conflict where you don't have to destroy the other person to be heard, for there to be reconciliation. I think the biggest question is, okay, that all sounds really great. Now, how do I do this in my own life? I think we all struggle with this because sometimes we don't have peace ourselves. If you are not living with the peacemaker as the Lord and Savior of your life, as the center of your being, it is going to be really hard for you to give peace away easily because you yourself are not at peace. So I invite you today, if you are living in a war in your soul and you are not at peace, to come and find Jesus today. I promise you, I have been in a relationship with him for 30 years, and he has never let me down. And even when anxiety has come, even when bad things have happened, even when I dealt with miscarriages, even when before I had my children, wanted children, even when there were deaths in my family, when there were things that could have just made me unglued, he anchored me. And that is peace. He will anchor you and give you peace that will be beyond what we can explain or know or imagine. So it's going to be hard to become that until you know him. There will be people here at the end of service to pray with you. If you don't know him yet, come and meet him. He is amazing. I promise you. He will blow your mind and your expectations. But if you do have a relationship with him, I want to challenge you. And because I've been serving Jesus for 30 years, I feel like I have a lot to learn and a lot to grow in. And probably one of the first things I encountered in this relationship with Jesus and working to be better at this peacemaking things was Shauna. I encountered me. I encountered a whole lot of me and a whole lot of my flesh, my ideas, my pride. I tend to be a tender heart, so I can get offended very easily, and I have to work through that. I tend to think I know what I'm talking about or think I'm some expert on something, and I'm not, I assure you. Just because we can Google things doesn't mean we know everything, guys, okay? I just want you to know. So I think biggest problem is me. And I think the first thing I typically do is, I know that hurts. So I'm just going to talk about me, not you, because it's probably just me. But the first thing I do when I have a problem with someone is I take this arrow and I'm like, it's over here. It's her, or it's him, or it's this person, or it's that person. And I can constantly point this arrow. And I never have to deal with this, right? Because I don't have to talk about my pride if the problem's over here, right? I don't have to create any kind of peace. I just cut them off. Now, there are times you have to do that with people, but I will tell you the majority of times we struggle with this. We make the problem over here so we don't have to do the hard work of picking up the mirror and looking at ourselves and dealing with what's in this mirror. And there's one side of this mirror that like magnifies all those pores and wrinkles and stuff, and I hate that side of the mirror, but that's probably the side of the mirror I need to spend some time with Jesus on, not to shame me or to make me feel bad or to like beat me down, but to say, God, like he talks about in Romans 12:2, instead fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. So he can change me. Because if I'm so busy putting the problem over here because of pride, if I'm in fear or pain, and all I do is point the arrow and say the problem's over here, and I just keep doing this and doing this, I am never going to be whole. I am always going to be hurting, armored up, ready for battle, ready to fight anybody that comes my way. And that is not the path forward. I can promise you. So I would challenge you, if you find yourselves doing this, or like me, you've done this, I won't say maybe you've done this, maybe it's just me, then I would challenge you to put this down and to pick this up. And it's hard to look at ourselves. It's hard to own our stuff. I know that. Pride will keep us from owning our stuff. Offense will keep us from owning our stuff. I struggle, honestly, my whole life with offense because I am like, my heart, I feel like it's like out beating outside my chest sometimes. So like people come at me, I'm like, oh, that hurt. Okay. And then, but God's teaching me that that's an area of growth for me. I have to work to think the best of someone. I have to be intentional about that and seek to understand instead of just be understood. Because I think that's what we do. We get armored up and we're like, I know my stuff. And whatever that is you think you know, you just beat that person down with it. And then later, what's left? A lot of hurt, a lot of pain, no reconciliation, no peace. But that's the very thing we want, right? And so we get in the way of it. The other thing we can do is we can avoid. Like we're like, peace, everybody, we're good. Okay, everything's good. We don't need to talk about anything. We're just going to pretend, right? We avoid, and we think we have peace. But we have nothing but a facade of peace. Just because you are keeping peace doesn't mean you are making peace. You are just pretending that everything's okay. And as long as we're constantly asking God, okay, do this on the outside so it feels better, and we're not saying do this on the inside so that we can be transformed and renewed, we will continue to live with a facade of peace. And we will have no peace in our soul. And so being a peacemaker requires a lot of work. It requires humility. It requires laying down our offenses, our pride. It requires having hard conversations. And it's not easy. I'm going to tell you, I've kind of derailed from my notes here, but I'll get back on track. But ultimately, it's all the same. I think being vulnerable is hard work. Taking that armor down is hard work. Brene Brown wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness, and she's a researcher and a doctor, and I really love her work. But this book really challenged me. She said, we are in pain and fear. Anger and hate are our go-to emotions. And it's so true. When we are in pain and fear, we can easily hate and we can easily be angry. And we can easily pull out this arrow and point the finger outside of ourselves. Bravery is vulnerability. Bravery is confronting those things and talking about them in a way that can bring healing and seek to bring wholeness. And this is another quote from her book, and it should come up on the screen. And if your faith asks you to find the face of God in everyone you meet, that should include the politicians, media, strangers on Twitter with whom you most violently disagree. When we desecrate their divinity, we desecrate our own, and we betray our faith. Now, if we don't live, I think probably every time in society there's these polarizing moments where we can just throw arrows and daggers at each other. But we are betraying our faith every time we do that. Because the image of God, he calls us all his image bearers. And we are called to love all. God's been teaching me a lot about this. Recently, last year, we did an event called Better Together. And we partner with other churches, and maybe you were here for that if you weren't. Basically, we partnered with some area churches. We did a big outreach. We all wore shirts. We went and did service projects in our community. And the whole time, we thought, this is great. We're doing something great, awesome. After it's over, you always get the feedback. We ask for feedback, so we want feedback. But you get the feedback about what was wrong, what was bad, what we should have done differently. And I felt like, instead of taking all that in fully, I felt like God just said, wait, don't take all that in. Because I always want to learn and grow, so hear that. But I think our job at the end of the day for Better Together was never about the projects we were doing. It was never about us feeling good about what we did for Glen Burnie. But rather, he was trying to elevate our gaze to something bigger, something better. And I really fully didn't understand it until we went to Kenya last year. So last year, while we were in Kenya, we worked on several projects while we were there. We worked in Mathare Valley in the slum area with kids, and it was awesome. They're just beautiful. It was beautiful people, beautiful place. One other thing we went there to do was to build a greenhouse. And so this is us after we built the greenhouse. And you can't tell, but it wasn't fully finished, but it was finished enough when we took this picture. But we look really proud, like, yeah, we did this. We're awesome. Cool. But honestly, we didn't know what we were doing. We were really proud because we were amazed it was accomplished. None of us were skilled at this. None of us had ever built a greenhouse. The Maasai people did not need us, let me tell you. They were out there with machetes, cutting grass, digging holes for the poles quicker than we were like, where's the tools? What do? We are so fragile. We need a lawnmower. We don't know how to do this. And where's the proper tool for this? They're like, oh, this will work. We got this. And so they didn't honestly need us. Now, us being there helped them create a deadline. It helped Convoy of Hope sponsor the project. But they could have done this. We were very sure of that. And I think what it taught me more than anything, and they stop for tea every so often, and they really value relationship and community. And we're like, we got to get this done. We're Americans. We got to be productive. We're on it. We're aiming to accomplish everything we can today. We're on a schedule. And they're like, no, we're stopping for tea. And we're like, okay, when are we going to finish this? We're like caged animals while we drink our tea. Like, what are we doing? We got to accomplish this. And but God kind of spoke to all of us, I believe, by the end of it, that it was never about the greenhouse. It was never about any of that. It was about his children being together. It was about the unity. It was about us sitting across from each other, having a conversation while we drank tea, to know each other. And if he's got to use a greenhouse to bring his people together, he'll use it. He'll use whatever he can to bring his children together. So sometimes we are so ready to pat ourselves on the back for some great thing we did, right? But he's saying, I just want you to know and love each other. When he left this earth, he said, love God and love each other. Being a peacemaker is about caring more about that work than all this other stuff. And when we value everything else above making peace with each other, we are missing it. And I think God just loves us so much. He's like, that's cute. If you want to build a greenhouse, I think that's great. And I love you for it. Kind of like we do with our kids. If y'all want to work on that, that's great. Y'all are playing together. Y'all are happy. And I think that's kind of how God is with us. He's kind of like, yeah, you feel good about that. That's great. But I want you to know and love each other. I don't care about all this other stuff. I just want you to get in there and get to know each other. Sit across from each other. Look into the eyes of your brother and sister. I'll do whatever I can do to put you in the same room so you can do that work. And can you imagine if we did that work more? This community would not be able to stand the Jesus they would see, because he would dispel evil left and right. Because there is so much power in the unity of the body of Christ. I want to tell you today, I think the thing that God would do for us if we are his children is he would give us one of these. And he would say, and it would be much bigger than this, I feel like. It would be as big as this whole world. And he would say, get in there. And invite that person in there that you're not quite sure you can get along with. He would say, and work it out. Talk about it. Lay down your pride, lay down your offenses, and get along. But don't just get along, love each other. Work at this thing. Be a peacemaker. So I don't know where you're at in your life. I don't know what challenges you have, relationships you're struggling with. But I want to invite you today that if there are people you know when you're in conflict with somebody, if there's someone you know that there's the possibility of that being resolved, I challenge you to take a step towards that. If that means first step is pulling this thing out and figuring out what your stuff is, do that before you go to them. But start working on this, looking at yourself really, and dealing with those inward things instead of pointing that arrow. And if you don't know this Jesus that I've talked about and you're like, well, I just came here for Mother's Day, I don't know, I'm here, I would challenge you today to just come and ask us about him. We would love to tell you about him. There'll be people up here. There's a next steps card in the pew in front of you. You can grab that, fill it out, and bring it and talk to us, because I will tell you, he will create peace in your life in a way nothing else can. You can fill that hole with a million other things, but he will be the one that can fill it. And then we also have a parenting seminar coming up. If you're a parent and you're like, I'm struggling with this parenting thing, or maybe you want to become a parent and you're like, I don't know, my childhood was crazy, I don't know how to be a parent. Come to this. We will have real conversations, and there will be skills and tools there to help you. It is in your bulletin. You can just fill it out, stick it in one of the boxes, drop it off at the welcome table. But those are just some next steps, practical things you can do. Honestly, the major thing we can do is humble ourselves and come before God and ask him to show us those places in our heart. So as I pray, I'm going to ask our ministry leaders to come forward and be ready to pray with people as they're willing and ready. Thank you, God, that you are the ultimate peacemaker. The work you did on the cross was to reconcile us to you. And whatever we bring before you are filthy rags often. But God, you love us so. Thank you for being the lifter of our head. Thank you for being our comforter. Thank you for being our strength. Thank you for being our guide. God, I pray, God, that you will draw us close to you and to one another. May we love the way you love. Teach us, Father. In your name I pray. Amen.